Okay. Let's get this going again. The Italian restaurant's interior decoration. Benno, when do you think you'll be able to take me to an ink workshop? I wanted to try making ink before winter came, and I wanted to do research at an ink workshop before starting anything. I stopped at Benno's store on my way to the temple to ask about this, only for him to shake his head. The ink can wait. Construction on the restaurant should be done soon. I want to talk about the decorations a bit more. Benno said, the outside of the restaurant's all finished. The interior comes next, and I want to hear about what kinds of tapestries, art, and so on are used in the nobilities section of the temple. Bring Fran with you no matter what. Benno's tone made it sound like he wanted Fran's opinion first and foremost, with me just being an afterthought. I couldn't blame him. I wasn't particularly well versed on what kind of interior decorations nobles liked. Suddenly, it hit me. I had another attendant who was probably well informed about decoration and aesthetics. Benno, should I bring my new attendant to talk about decorations? Her name's Rosina, and she's a Grey Shrine Maiden who was exceptionally favored by an art-loving noble, to the point where she had an upbringing more privileged than a lot of lay nobles. I'm sure she'll be able to provide the kind of perspective a noblewoman would have. Fran had been educated by the high priest and knew much about the nobility's proclivities, but suffered from a lack of flexibility. The high priest himself had a tendency to dislike the unnecessary, his mindset embodied by the phrase, simple is best. In contrast, Rosina had been showered in the culture of an art-loving shrine maiden. She had a playful air to her taste and had a knack for presentation. The number of flowers in my chambers had grown ever since she arrived, and they were becoming increasingly presentable to visitors. Sounds good. I'll bring a carriage to the temple tomorrow afternoon, and we can go check out the restaurant. I'm going to be sending Hugo there too, so do something about tomorrow's food with whoever's left. It hurt that he completely ignored my ink problem, but I was glad the restaurant was finally getting finished. Lutz and I headed to the temple, chatting excitedly before arriving and telling everyone our plans for tomorrow. Benno will be sending a carriage tomorrow afternoon so that I might visit his restaurant. Fran, Rosina, would you be so kind as to accompany me? Of course. Furthermore, he would like Hugo to see the restaurant's kitchen. Please give him tomorrow off and direct him to the Gilberta Company. Will the new chef be fine on his own? Todd, I believe? I believe he'll be fine with Ella's assistance. I conveyed the plans to the chefs through Fran. Todd seemed uneasy, but I figured he could manage since Hugo had been fine with just Ella up until now. The next day after lunch, I had Fran and Rosina change into their outside clothes while Delia helped me take off my blue robe and get me into my long-sleeved, noble-looking blouse. Given that Hugo will be at the restaurant, I needed to dress and act like a noble. I wish I could go too. Jeez, I'm always the one left behind. My apologies, Delia. I need Rosina's informed opinion this time. I tried to appease Delia as best I could while she helped me prepare with a vexed look in her eyes. Bringing Delia to the restaurant wasn't in the cards, since I didn't know just how much she would tell the High Bishop. Not to mention that Delia seemed to be conveniently forgetting that she was always left behind. She didn't want to go to the orphanage, and she would rather hone her skills than go to the forest, but oh well. Perhaps I will need to prepare a reward for your service in minding my chambers while I'm absent, I said meaningfully before heading to the carriage Benno had prepared with Fran and Rosina. Fran, who was wearing his normal brown outfit, while Rosina was wearing a moss green dress with a dark green bodice covered in lined embroidery. It matched her wavy chestnut hair perfectly. And any way you look at her, she was the model image of a rich young lady. I complimented her and she gave an embarrassed curtsy, saying I praised her too much. She acts super cute even when embarrassed. Can I mimic that? No, definitely not. During the carriage ride, I explained to Rosina what the Italian restaurant was and what our job would be. We want the Italian restaurant to feel like an eatery for nobles. Our intended demographic is the rich owners of large stores, so the interior decoration needs to be classy. I would like to hear your and Fran's opinion on it, and with the understanding that it should be similar to a dining hall nobles would use. May I think of it as if I were decorating Sister Christine's room? Asked Rosina, and I nodded. I asked Fran to think of it like he was decorating for the High Priest or the High Bishop. In that case, please take care not to provide any opinions of your own, Fran warned. Hugo will be there, and it would be best if you spoke through us. Things always got heated and foul-mouthed when Benno and I had business discussions. It seemed I would need to write my thoughts on my diptych today. I really don't want to become a noble girl. They don't even get to talk when they want to. The bouncing, shaking carriage finally reached the restaurant. The outside construction had indeed been finished, and we found Lutz waiting for us at the entrance. I had to act like a noble, and he had to act like a merchant apprentice doing business with the noble. We both kept our backs straight and our eyes level. The fact that we didn't just grin at each other was commendable, if you asked me. Thank you for graciously accepting our invitation, sister mine. Lutz and I finished our farcical greetings, then stepped past the large, ornately covered wooden doors into the restaurant. Inside was a smallish hall that resembled the first floor of my chambers. This is the reception and waiting area. To the left is the kitchen, and to the right is the dining hall, explained Alonzo, pointing to the left and right. The right side of the hallway had a rectangular opening in it, which I could imagine would be the future location of a door. Behind it was Benno, who came this way after noticing us. Thank you for coming, Sister Mine. This is the restaurant's dining hall. Benno also greeted me politely, as he would with a noble. Yeah, he had to act like a noble. Hello. So he's gonna have to treat you like a noble. A dining hall seemed to be based on my orphanage director's chamber, since that was the noble abode he was most familiar with, but the result was an overwhelmingly white and featureless design. I intended to run a wainscot along the walls, but the ones I ordered with fanciful reliefs carved into it has not yet been completed. It seemed to be taking some time to finish. Unable to reply, I wrote delivery date of wainscot into my diptych. I've already decided on the wainscot and display shelves, but I do not know what art to display on the shelves. Sister Mina will be extremely grateful to hear your thoughts on what tapestries, art, sculptures, plants, and so on I should buy, as well as how to arrange them. Despite saying he wanted to hear my thoughts, Benno looked straight at Fran and Rosina. What kind of display shelves do you have in mind? Asked Fran. The contents of the shelves will depend on their height, width, and color, added Rosina. Benno answered their questions in stride. He knew what was popular among nobles, since he regularly did business with them. But as expected, Rosina dominated the discussion when it came to art and how to present it. Then Fran would offer cheaper alternatives to her suggestions, while gently holding her back when she suggested something too extravagant for a restaurant. Still unable to participate, I just jotted notes down on my diptych while listening to their discussion. An onlooker would surely struggle to tell which of us was the master. Sister Mine, what would you suggest we add? Only one thing comes to mind. Nothing would complete the restaurant aesthetic more than a bookshelf in the corner. Benno's eyes shot open, and after stifling a scream of, "You idiot! How much money do you think that would cost?" he glared at me. Sister Mine, chided Rosina, I do believe books are too expensive to buy for decorations. If placed in the dining hall, the smell of the ink would carry over to the food. Ew. Yeah, no. My shoulders fell as both my attendants rejected my idea. I knew it was unreasonable before I said it, but he asked what I suggested, and I wanted to be honest with my thoughts. If honesty wasn't appreciated here, I would just have to shut my mouth and let my attendants do all the talking. Given that you intend to open the restaurant in the spring, began Rosina, perhaps you would be better off focusing on the carpet rather than tapestries. Noble rooms will always have carpet so as to stifle the sounds of footsteps and serving carts. It will be difficult to find thick carpet suitable for pushing serving carts over, but it will be well worth the price. It provided advice not only from the perspective of nobles, but from the perspective of those serving the nobles. Benno and I both wrote down their thoughts on their diptychs. The conversation advanced smoothly with the number of tables, number of chairs, leftover space to be kept in reserve, and so on, all getting discussed. Regarding the table, said Fran, I believe that removing the tablecloths and using napkins instead is an important step towards feeling more like somewhere where a noble might eat. Napkins are like tablecloths cut into small squares so that diners can wipe their hands individually, and as of late, the nobility use them almost exclusively. Fran's words made my face light up. Tablecloths here weren't used for decoration like they were back on Earth. They were used to rub food off your faces, to wipe your face, and even to blow your nose. Ew! Who would do that in public? Especially a noble. A new tablecloth might look nice, but after repeated usage, the filth became too baked in to remove. It was so unhygienic that it was actually causing dysentery and other diseases to spread. Oh yeah, don't use tablecloths, yeah. Fran, that is a spectacular idea, I said. Filthy tablecloths will only ruin the high-class atmosphere. With napkins sized for individual use, it will be trivial to replace dirty ones once they become impossible to clean. A restaurant must prioritize cleanliness above all else. Some diners will clean themselves on the tablecloths if given the opportunity, so our best option is to remove the tablecloths entirely and prepare napkins in their place. Benno nodded and stroked his chin in thought. Meanwhile, Rosina tapped my shoulder and signaled for me to stop talking. Did I get too excited? Sorry, I just hate the dirty tablecloths here. So much. Once we finished discussing the dining hall, we moved to the kitchen. It was largely identical to the one in my chambers, but larger. I looked around and saw Mark and Hugo talking. I had Fran ask how their discussions on the cooking tools, ingredients, and firewood had concluded. We have decided to order the same tools I have grown used to using in Sister Mine's kitchen, answered Hugo. I heard him loud and clear, but Fran repeated it to me before asking my thoughts. It's good to prepare tools you're used to using, but think carefully about how many of them to buy. For some tools, it's better to buy many extras for when you're too busy to clean them. I whispered my thoughts into Fran's ear. After he repeated them to Hugo, his eyes shot open wide in shock as if he had never considered that option. Mark was taking notes in his own diptych, which they had apparently made at some point. It would be wise to secure 3 separate avenues from which to buy fresh, good-tasting ingredients. You will also need a lot of wood to run the ovens. Correct? Start securing a stockpile of it as soon as possible without forgetting the possibility of ordering it from other cities. After finishing our discussion in the kitchen, we all got into the carriage, except for Mark and Hugo, and headed for the Gilberta Company. There we would discuss matters without reservation. As soon as I entered the store, I tossed off my noble girl facade. Rosina whispered if I had a business discussion with Benno like a noble, I would have no idea if he was understanding me or not. I raised a hand, my diptych open and ready. Okay, Benno, I'm going to ask about some things. You implied the wainscot was late, but when is it actually going to be finished? Isn't it essential for the restaurant's decoration? I don't think you'll be able to put up the art or display shelves without it. The workshop's hurrying, but it's definitely not going to be finished before winter. Can't say I'm surprised. They've got to do the doors and window panes, too. Something about Benno's elaboration seemed odd to me. I furrowed my brow and thought, wait, are you saying you ordered everything from the same workshop? Naturally, you gotta stick with your partner's workshop, as he said, but it seemed to me that asking one workshop to make doors, window panes, wainscot, and so on, each with ornately carved reliefs, was just going to end up with them being overworked. Why not just split the orders between different carpentry workshops? It'll take way too long if you ask one workshop to do everything. You would save a lot of time if you asked one workshop to do the wainscot, one to decorate the door, one to decorate the window panes, and another to make the display shelves. Apparently, it was normal to do what Benno did and form a partnership with a workshop that would do everything, no matter how long it took. I saved a lot of time setting up my workshop since I just bought materials that had already been made, which gave me a biased perception. I'll trust that you know what you're talking about, Benno, but most craftsmen will be able to do this kind of thing if you give them detailed instructions. So I think you'd be better off forming connections with multiple workshops. I'll think about it. Benno started writing something on a wooden board, and I used the opportunity to check what was next on my list. What about tableware? Nobles don't use wooden tableware much at all. I've ordered some pewter plates, but they're going to be a while too. It takes a lot of time to make that many of the same thing. No helping this either, nobles don't share. In cheap restaurants, it was normal to eat with your hands instead of utensils, and plates were made of hard bread. People even shared their utensils and plates when they had them, though less in recent times than before, thank God. But nobles were different. To match the style of nobles, you needed tableware for each individual customer, which meant you had to make a bunch from scratch, which was exactly why he should have split the orders between workshops to speed the process up. What if you used a different workshop for each table's worth of tableware? Maybe changing what kind you use depending on the price of the food? You're getting ahead of yourself. It seems that ordering from multiple workshops at once really was frowned upon. With Benno glowering in front of me, I changed my suggestion. In that case, why not order silver and porcelain tableware as well? Since it's not all from the same kind of workshop. That would be too expensive, Benno said with a grimace. You can use them exclusively for higher class customers to make them feel special. The plates and such can be put on display for decoration when not in use. That's a good point. What do you two think? Benno looked at Fran and Rosina. Fran spoke first. I believe the sister-mind suggestion would be fairly effective. Even nobles use different plates when serving guests of honor. However, according to Fran and Rosina, nobles brought their own utensils and cups with them when dining with others. They would brag about their quality, and some of them were family heirlooms passed down from generations. Tableware was a reflection of one's fortune, and apparently most important of all, it was commonplace for nobles to bring even their own plates to lower the risk of being poisoned. Ah, okay. Commoners definitely don't do anything like that, observed Benno. That's fine, we can be trendsetters here and spread noble customs to everyone. I said, the restaurant will have its own tableware just in case, but what if it's in your invitation you told the first people eating here to bring their own utensils and cups? If they're rich, I'm sure they have tableware they're proud of, and some people might buy new ones just so they can brag. Do you have any tableware you could show off, Benno? Benno groaned a little. I do. I got the feeling that if I kick off a battle of people showing off their prized tableware, it'll never end. But I do have some tableware I would want to bring if someone told me to bring my own. Okay, the restaurant won't need many utensils if you have people bring their own. And you won't have to worry about expensive tableware being stolen by customers. Benno had said that his greatest concern about decorating the restaurant like a noble's mansion was customers stealing or destroying things. I personally couldn't imagine stealing something from a restaurant, but apparently it wasn't uncommon. Oh yeah, speaking of which, you said you knew a way to cut down on theft and people leaving without paying their checks, yeah? What is it? I puffed up my chest with confidence and answered, simple, introduction only. How to run a restaurant. When I explained the idea behind an introductions-only system, Benno shrugged his shoulders, unimpressed. Apparently, it was more than commonplace to deny people entry into stores and restaurants without an introduction, or based on their clothes. Customers paying and acting well are two different things. Just because a customer pays well doesn't mean they're going to be a good customer. In fact, a lot of them get smug and arrogant since they know they're paying well. You think I want that? Benno sighed and scratched his head, probably imagining a ton of annoying customers he'd had like that. Oh, imagining a ton of annoying customers he had like that. I went ahead and explained the difference between my idea and the introduction generally given in this city. An introduction-only system doesn't stop at the introduction. If a customer introduces someone who steals, doesn't pay, or causes any other problems, then said customer will be responsible for paying and cleaning up the mess. You want the customer to be responsible? Benno slammed a fist on the table and shot up, his eyes wide as he looked down at me in shock. He must not have expected my explanation at all. Yes, customers will be much less likely to cause problems, since they'll be involving those who introduced them in the mess. Those introducing others will be very careful about who they choose. Naturally, since problems resulting from their introduction will come back to them, they'll only introduce people who can be trusted. But won't that be expecting too much from customers? Benno sat back down and rubbed his temple. My suggestion had been much more of a shock for him than I had anticipated. It was normal to require introductions, but clearly those who gave introductions were never held responsible for anything. Ultimately, you're prioritizing the atmosphere of the store and preventing problems, so the end result will be your regulars feeling like they matter, while they enjoy pleasant, uninterrupted meals. But, well, I'll leave this decision up to you, Benno. My job was to give advice. Benno's job was to make decisions based on that advice. He asked me a question about a problem, and I gave him a potential solution. Nothing more, nothing less. My life as a merchant ended before I even became an apprentice. I had no idea if my ideas would hold water in this city. I will say, though, that I don't think you'll have any problems with implementing new systems as long as you're consistent with them from the start. This is a restaurant where commoners will be able to eat food fit for nobles. It's trailblazing, and everyone will know it. You'll have problems if you try introducing something new after the restaurant's already been open, though. Benno furrowed his eyebrows harder and glared at empty space. I'm gonna need to iron out a lot of details if I do that. Can't you just lay out a few rules that definitely should never be broken? Then make tiny changes depending on how things play out? This is gonna be a totally new system, so being loose and flexible should be more effective than trying to get it perfectly right from the start. Probably. Benno fell into thought, so I looked back down at my diptych. Okay, that's enough about the introduction-only system. Let's think about what we need to get ready before the restaurant opens. What are you talking about? We just finished talking about that. Benno gave me a puzzled look. I double-checked my list of things I wasn't sure about, then glared at Benno while pouting. What are you talking about? The only thing we finished talking about was the interior decoration. You'll need menus and bells for each table, won't you? Both need to be very high quality to match the restaurant's atmosphere. Menus? What for? The servers can tell them what we have. Restaurants in this world have the servers inform customers of the menu. That was fine for commoner eateries, where the most complex thing to ask for was whether you wanted your sausage cooked or boiled. And for nobles, since servers needed to merely state what the chefs had already made. But in a restaurant like ours, where different people would be picking different foods from a long list of things they hadn't heard of before, menus were necessary to keep everything in order. The server wouldn't last without them. If you write all the food and spirits available in a restaurant on menus and put them at each table, customers will be able to know what you're serving without asking the waiter about every little thing. They'll be able to pick what they want at their own pace, too. I don't know how many servers you intend to hire, but the less time they have to spend at each table, the better. What about people who don't know how to read? Benno's grimace reminded me just how low the literacy rate was here, but it wouldn't be a problem here. The restaurant's first customers will be the owners of large stores, right? Lutz had to learn to read just to become an apprentice merchant, so I can't imagine that large store owners will be illiterate. Not to mention that said large store owners will be discussing business while eating, which meant they would have servants with pens and boards standing by. It should be safe to assume that someone involved in this equation would know how to read. They wouldn't be able to do their job if they couldn't read or write contracts. Oh, and about the menus. Do you want me to make some, thicker paper and put plants inside like I did before? I can make paper menus for the regular dishes, and for the seasonal dishes, I think that would make good advertising for our plant paper. I'd like for the menus to be pretty fashionable, not cute, but pretty and fitting for a noble environment. I wonder what plant would be good for this season. Maybe I should go all the way and try making colored paper. Paper? Really? You think menus are that important? Menus are essential for restaurants. Oh, should I go and form the Mind Workshop? My attendant has such lovely handwriting, it's like art unto itself. Impressive, don't you think? I don't get what you're talking about or why it's so important, but alright, I'll leave it to you. Benno cradled his head in exhaustion. With a new job secured, I grinned and began thinking of menu designs in my head. You can count on me. By the way, what are you going to do about waiters? Commoners you find on the street won't have the elegance that nobles demand from their servers. Oh dear. There was a big difference between the waiters at commoner eateries and servers at nobles' mansions. I knew that especially well thanks to Fran and my other attendants serving me food. I wouldn't want Benno thinking Fran was on the same level as some lower city rando that didn't even care about spilling drinks or dropping a little food. And it seemed he did not, given that he looked at me with a somewhat pitiful expression. Can't you handle that somehow? You want me to train waiters in my chambers too? The chefs are one thing, but I don't think I'll get permission to bring waiters into my room. What about letting priests work outside the temple? I have lunch with the high priest tomorrow, so I'll ask him then. Don't get your hopes up, though. The high priest had previously said that only those who had nobody to look after them or introduce them to work became priests and shrine maidens. At the time, I interpreted that as they can go outside if someone starts looking after them. But now that I knew more about the dark underside of the temple and the orphanage, I couldn't take his words at face value. He might allow them to work outside since the temple had an overabundance of gray priests and needed money, or he might not for fear of it breaking down the temple's internal structure. We were in some awkward middle ground. By the way, I was thinking of inviting the high priest to the first round of visitors. What do you think, Benno? Hold up. The high priest? You think a real noble would bother to come? It seemed that a noble visiting a commoner store was beyond ridiculous. If they wanted to see a merchant, they generally summoned them to their home in the noble's quarter. The temple was located in between the noble's quarter and the commoner part of the city, and thus had gates connecting the two. But blue priests never entered the lower city unless a ceremony required it. The high priest seemed to be interested in the food I've thought up. It depends on how I approach it, but I don't think he'd refuse if I ask. I said while the fascinated Benno stroked his chin and fell into thought, which is why I think you should invite only people you can really trust to the first round of visitors. Don't you think they'll feel super special for getting to eat with a noble? They sure will. The Italian restaurant will develop an amazing reputation right off the bat if an actual noble has eaten there. My words made Benno's dark-red eyes flash with the carnivorous light of a merchant who had found profit. Don't treat it like the pound cake taste testing event where we invited a bunch of people. Invite a small group of people, those you can trust. With the number of chefs we have now, you won't be able to make all of that much food. The food is expensive enough that the potential customer base for it isn't too large. Why not make it an exclusive, high-class restaurant where only the chosen can enter? The chosen few with lots of cash to dump right into our hands. That'll work if we can get the high priest's help. Don't mess us up, mine. Benno gave me a firm handshake and we grinned at each other, at which point Rosina tilted her head elegantly. Excuse me, sister mine, what about music? When nobles eat, multiple musicians are summoned so that they might take turns playing while the meal proceeds. Will no music be played in the restaurant? Well, I hadn't thought about music at all. I looked back at Benno only to see him raise his hands and surrender. Sorry, but I don't know any musicians good enough to play for nobles. How would you feel about playing music in the restaurant, Rosina? I'm willing to do anything if it means spending more of my time playing music. Rosina replied so quickly and confidently that I realized she had probably brought up music specifically because she wanted to be the one playing it. This will be a mostly lunchtime restaurant, right? If people ask for music when making reservations and pay a fee for the service, well, I can lend you Rosina. I wouldn't mind lending him Rosina if there were customers who wanted music enough to pay a fee for it. She could make it in time if she went to the restaurant after third bell rang and our practice ended. But she needed to learn to do paperwork too, and the high priest would get involved if it came to her going outside every day. Hey, what about nighttime? Well, that's going to be a hard no from me, obviously. Nighttime means alcohol, and I'm not going to throw a cutie like Rosina into a den of drunk wolves. If you want music at night, find a musician of your own. Waitresses working at nighttime bars here tended to be prostitutes on the side. And despite the nature of the Italian restaurant, there would probably be some customers who wouldn't take no for an answer. I had no intention whatsoever of putting Rosina in an environment like that. 6 bell rang as we ironed out the details, signaling the end of the workday. Benno eyed me while writing a summary of what we had discussed. You better learn a lot from the high priest tomorrow. You can count on me. Why do I feel so nervous? Said Benno, holding his stomach in faux pain. I blew up my cheeks in a big pout. You know who's nervous? Me, about whether this restaurant's ever going to get finished. Slowpoke. The next day came, and it was the date of my lunch with the high priest. The time until third bell was my last cramming opportunity, and I practiced my heart out as Rosina watched over me with steely determination. I could play the harpsichord itself without much issue, but I always lost my place among the strings when I started to sing. I would be fine if I was just careful about that. After practice, there was time to help the high priest with his paperwork. Fran was busy preparing for the lunch, and this entrusted Gil with taking me there. Personally, I wasn't extremely worried since the high priest was reasonable, and would be forgiving of some mistakes, but Fran and Rosina were both on edge. They always end up on the same page when nobles are involved. After fourth bell, I returned to my room with Gil. Delia cleaned me up a bit. Then I left the room with Rosina carrying a large harpspiel and Fran holding the utensils and the box containing the small harpspiel. Rosina had been asked to play music during lunch, and in contrast to how my hands were already shaking with nervousness at the prospect of playing the song I had finished learning days ago, she looked calm and composed. "Aren't you nervous, Rosina?" "I am nervous. There is an unsettling feeling stirring in my chest." She spoke with such a bright smile that I had a hard time believing her. But Rosina's smile was a weapon she wielded just like noble women. It was a tool to protect oneself and show no weakness to others. It's next to impossible for me to tell, but I suppose you're forcing that smile to hide your nervousness. Yes, a smile tells others that you are in control of the situation. We arrived at the high priest's room just as a number of grey priests were moving furniture around in preparation for lunch. With their trained movements in the corner of my eye, I greeted the high priest just like a noble would. I said the exact words Fran had beaten into my head and curtsied the same way Rosina had trained me. The exact way Rosina had trained me to. Fran and Rosina had thought of the greeting together. It began with all the names of gods and used poetic metaphors to express how honored I was to receive his invitation. So it was pretty long. I had to say it while kneeling on one knee and crossing my arms in front of my chest. Behaving gracefully was pure suffering for someone lacking in muscles like me. Lutz was told to memorize the greetings with me, and even he couldn't believe it. He actually started complaining, saying that a simple thank you for the invitation should suffice. He has memorized the greetings with me since he would be dealing with nobles as a Laharl, but the number of difficult expressions and hard-to-pronounce deity names were beating him down. I was used to polytheism myself as a Japanese person, but whenever noble greetings got involved, I found myself wishing the religion here was monotheistic. But still, our practice here bore fruit. I managed to give a greeting twice as graceful as my normal greetings without ever stumbling or forgetting what to say. Thank God for that. I stepped on my robe at the end and struggled to stand up, but I didn't fall over. I sure have grown. Good enough. Not great, but not bad either. You two have trained her well. Jerk. Now, let us see if her harpspiel practice has gone just as well. After the high priest praised my attendants for their efforts, his lips curved into a slight grin at the sight of the harpspiel in Fran's hands. I looked at Rosina with a smile. If I have gotten better, it is thanks to my splendid teacher. Oh, perish the thought. You have a talent for music, sister mine. You learn the musical scale in the blink of an eye, and reading music comes more naturally to you than anyone I have ever seen. The movements of your fingers are still awkward, but practice will take care of that. Stop. I don't have any talent. It's all leftovers from my past life's piano practice and music lessons. I wanted to grovel on the floor and swear I didn't deserve her praise, but now wasn't the time for that. I tried smelling to hide my anxiety, as I had been taught moments prior, but I could feel my mouth twitching. Fascinating. You will show me the fruits of that practice while lunch is being prepared. At the high priest's orders, a grey priest prepared a chair for me and helped me sit. Fran handed me my harpspiel, whispering encouragement as he did so. All I needed to do was repeat what I had practiced. The song wasn't that hard since it was the first one, but I would be fine if I stayed calm. If it says what she's singing, I'm not saying it. After taking some deep breaths, I looked up and saw that Rosina was tensed up as if nervous. She resembled a mother seeing her child play at their first school recital. I strummed the harpspiel strings. The short practice song I had learned was called The Autumn Harvest. The lyrics simply consisted of listing food names, then calling them tasty, and it wasn't too hard if I could just keep my fingers moving. No, I'm not singing it. After finishing the song without making any mistakes, I let out a sigh of relief. Not bad at all. Indeed, Sister Mine is quite the fast learner. Actually, Sister Mine, why not use this opportunity to play the song you composed the other day? What? The song I composed? I don't remember anything like that. I believe it went like this. I wasn't sure if it was because I was a kid or because this body was just built for it. But these ears are better at picking up sound than my Irano ears had been. I didn't have perfect pitch or anything, but I was pretty good. It was easier to convert my thoughts into the musical scale than it had been in my Irano days. At one point I tried playing a random song I remembered, and apparently Rosina remembered that in full. I haven't thought of any lyrics for it yet. Maybe next time. Naturally, translating the English lyrics to a movie theme song into this world's language was a bit too much to ask for me to do on the spot. But after I shook my head, the high priest gave a slight smile with his eyes shining in curiosity. Yes, have it ready by next time. Here's the next song for you to learn. No, I've made things harder on myself again. Yeah, you need to keep your self in check on that. I wept on the inside while taking the new sheet music from him. Now I had to learn a new song and think up lyrics for my own song. Now then, let us eat. Gleaming silver tableware was set on the table in front of the high priest. Fran had lined up my own tableware in front of me. It was common practice for only servants to touch their master's tableware, for fear of it being stolen or destroyed. The tableware I was using had been left by the prior orphanage director, which meant it was pretty good. Fran had suggested that I buy a new set, but I turned him down. A set that matched the room would be too expensive, I told him. I don't know what kind of person the former orphanage director was, but their sins are not the sins of their belongings. And took the tableware for myself. Oh, she knows that something happened, but she don't know what. As I had eaten the equivalent of what nobles ate at the guildmaster's house, the food was delivered in courses similar to what I expected. First drinks were poured, then appetizers, then soup, and then the main dishes, then fruits and a dessert, and then the meal finished with tea. However, the quantity and quality of the food was on another level. I knew it was because the leftovers were given to servants, but the appetizer course alone had 8 plates with different kinds of food. Good Lord! An attendant would bring food to their master's plate bit by bit, and if I didn't hold back, I would get beyond full just on the appetizer. Fran knew well how much I could eat, and selected portions from the 3 kinds of foods I would be most likely to enjoy. I chomped down on them while thinking about how Benno and I could improve our own food. Our food tasted just as good, but it seemed we needed to work on our presentation. How we cut the food, put it on the plates, and so on. Noble cooking had some pretty high-level presentation, but soup was just as bland here as it was at the guildmaster's. If there was one battle my food won, it was with the soup. The main dishes came in several plates. There was a lot of meat, but I couldn't see any fish. It seemed that even nobles didn't eat fish much at all. I wonder why. As we ate, we talked about my harpspiel practice, questions I had about the paperwork, the state of the orphanage, and the status of the mime workshop. The high priest mainly just gave non-committal comments to things I said. He sometimes said things laden with euphemisms, but I could never figure out what he was actually trying to say. The conversation was basically a loop of me tilting my head until the high priest sighed in defeat and gave up. Looks like Fran and the other grey priests will be solid waiters. Maybe I should work harder to get music for the restaurant. I couldn't help but think that way while listening to Rosina play the harpspiel as we ate. Back in my Arano days, every store I ever walked into would have music playing in the background. But listening to music wasn't so easy in this world. At this point, I ended up sentimental every time I got the opportunity to hear music at all. You seem to have fallen into thought. Was this lunch a good reference for you? Asked the high priest while sipping his after-meal tea. Yes, very. And by the way, before I go, can I talk to you about something? Wait, discussions with you are best left elsewhere. The high priest interrupted me, so I slowly finished the rest of my strong-smelling tea. He opened the secret room and I followed him inside. By now, I was used to clearing space on the bench to sit while the high priest brought his chair. Now, what is it this time? Okay, see you guys next time.